The Amazon is one of 2 ascendancies you'll be able to select when playing the new class, the Huntress, in the Dawn of the Hunt update. In this video, I'm going to cover this ascendancy, taking a look at all of the options available and what builds we might see on this class. Let's begin on the right-hand side of this ascendancy, with the Azmeri Brew notable, which is a 2-point branch coming right off of the start location. Life flasks also recover mana, mana flasks also recover life. So how this works is that the recovery you gain from the flask for the normal resource is also recovered as the other resource. So if you have a mana flask that recovers 250 mana per second, it will also recover 250 life per second. Now there's a lot of clusters for flask charges gained and increased recovery for both life and mana flasks on the passive skill tree, especially around the Ranger and Huntress start location. But there's also some interesting keystones that you can utilise with this node. For example, Eternal Youth, which makes life recovery from flasks apply to your energy shield instead. In this case, your life and mana flask can both be used to recover your energy shield, making this keystone a more reliable mechanic for ES recovery as you'll have more flask charges available to make use of. There's also Oasis, which prevents charm usage but grants 30% more recovery from flasks, and this boost will affect recovery for all resources that the flask recovers. So with a reasonable investment into flasks on the tree, this node provides a decent solution to both life and mana recovery. But this ascendancy has a little bit more going on with life recovery from a different node on the opposite side of this cluster. It's another 2-point branch, also extending from the start location, Mystic Harvest. Life Leech recovers based on your elemental damage as well as physical damage. Now it's super interesting to see this node pop up on an ascendancy, and this really goes a long way to reinforce their design philosophy for recovery in general in PoE 2, where it should be harder to solve and have a higher investment overall compared to PoE 1. Leech in PoE 2 is pretty much exclusively limited to physical attack damage, and this node will allow your elemental damage to proc your Leech modifiers as well. This means you can play a full elemental attack build that has access to Leech. Now Leech is generally quite weak in PoE 2 right now, but we may see some changes in the upcoming patch to improve it. But at the very least, this node allows Leech to actually function on many of the builds that will ultimately be played on this class, where a lot of the abilities have built-in damage conversion. If a build has some recovery issues, I could see a 2-point investment into Azmeri Brew or Mystic Harvest being quite a good solution. Okay, there's one more 2-point branch right in the middle of this cluster, and once again it branches right off of the start location, Stalking Panther. Evasion rating from equipped helmet, gloves and boots is doubled. Evasion rating from equipped body armor is halved. Alright, this one is super interesting. It completely changes the dynamic of how you would usually scale your core defense stat from gear, by shifting the importance of gaining a high amount of that stat from the body armor over to other gear slots instead. So firstly, it's important to mention here that these slots are not equal in terms of how much evasion you can actually obtain from them. The helmet in particular can get a lot more evasion compared to both the gloves and boots, whilst the glove slot has the least potential. For example, this triple tier 1 prefix expert hunted with 1500 evasion rating, while boots need a prefix open for movement speed, and gloves, even with 3 tier 1 prefixes, only comes out at just over 900 evasion. There's also the option there to utilise hybrid evasion ES gear, but you do lose effectiveness from the node as it only doubles evasion in those slots. Now the real potential of this node is allowing the use of powerful, unique body armors which typically have low base defenses. A great example is Queen of the Forest, which has a mediocre amount of evasion, but grants the powerful modifier 1% increased movement speed per 500 evasion rating, and also makes other movement speed modifiers not apply to you. This not only allows you to gain a huge amount of movement speed from investing into high evasion gear on your helmet, gloves and boot slots, but the boot slot in particular doesn't require movement speed anymore, so that prefix is opened up for more evasion scaling or a valuable life roll. There's also Dusk Bloom, which is a great option to help solve recovery on any evasion-based build using Stalking Panther. You gain a stack of fragile regrowth per second up to 10 stacks, and each stack grants 0.5% life regen and 10% increased mana regen rate. You lose all stacks when hit, and usually it'd be quite hard to scale evasion with this item as it has such a low amount of base evasion. But with the notable on this ascendancy, you'll actually be able to use this one and still achieve a good amount of total evasion. The Dancing Mirage is another incredible option here, granting less damage taken if you haven't been hit recently, and increased evasion if you have. This is another item which suffers greatly from having such low base evasion, but once again it has great synergy with this node. Now the other interesting things you can do here is make use of a body armor for one of the other defensive stats with no downside other than not gaining evasion from your body armor, because the penalty only applies to evasion. So some options here could include Ghost Wraith, Cloak of Flame, and Perfidy, or a well-crafted energy shield body armor. I really like this node. It's very build defining and opens up a bunch of options which were previously really hard to pull off on another ascendancy. Alright, let's move on to one of the 4-point branches, beginning with Elemental Infusion. Grant skill Infused Weapon. When you consume a power charge, trigger Infused Weapon to gain 2 Cold Infusion. Then you have the same for Endurance charges to gain Fire Infusion, and the same for Frenzy charges to gain Lightning Infusion. So here's the Infused Weapon skill, and how it works is that when you use a projectile attack skill, it will essentially consume Infusion to empower the first projectile of that attack, and that projectile will explode at the end of its flight. So this is a level 20 Infused Weapon skill. It deals 612% weapon damage, and Cold Infusion projectiles will have 100% Fizz converted to Cold, and then you have the same for the other 2 elements based on their infusion. Now this is quite a lot of extra damage, and the explosion radius is decent too, so this will be quite good for clearing. The amount you gain out of this skill is purely based on how much charge generation you can reasonably have in your build, and of course the speed at which you're firing off attack projectiles. And one of the interesting things here is that this skill infuses a projectile from the used attack rather than firing its own projectile, which is important considering the mechanics of some projectile attack skills. Now branching off of this is Infused Avatar, 50% chance for infusion to not be consumed when infusing a projectile. So this node allows you to double down on this mechanic by improving the efficiency of your charge generation. On average, you'll be able to fire 2 infused projectiles per infusion, which feeds into how many charges you can generate, how fast you're attacking, and how often you can therefore proc this ability. Now moving on to the next 4-point branch, we have Predatory Instinct. Reveal weaknesses against rare and unique enemies, 50% more damage against enemies with an open weakness. Okay, so we get to see this a little bit in the reveal video. Weaknesses are portions of the life bar that are highlighted, and when the monster's life is in a segment of weakness, they're considered to have an open weakness. Now we don't know how much damage this will work out to be overall across a full life bar, but while the monster has an open weakness, you'll deal 50% more damage to them. Based on the small bit of footage we got here, if that boss didn't have any weakness on the portion of life that was already missing, this looks like it will be about 20% more damage overall. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a small portion of weakness on the missing part of life, in which case this would work out to be maybe 25% more damage on average, or somewhere around there. Now here's a really important thing about this node though. The wording is 50% more damage against enemies with an open weakness, not that the enemy takes 50% more damage, and this is really crucial for ailments. If you inflict a damaging ailment, bleeding, poison, or ignite, during the time where the enemy has an open weakness, that ailment will deal 50% more damage for its full duration, even if their life bar moves out of the open weakness portion. So ailment setups have massive potential with this node. Okay, branching off of this notable is In for the Kill. 20% increased movement speed and 40% increased skill speed while an enemy with an open weakness is in your presence. So these boosts are only active when the enemy is actually on a portion of life that has the weakness exposed. This node is actually quite strong not only offensively but defensively too, as you're able to move around faster and spend less time executing abilities while an enemy has an open weakness. In terms of damage though, this is actually going to be quite a lot less on most builds compared to the previous node, as increased skill speed is additive with increases to attack speed or cast speed. Alright, the final 4-point branch on the Amazon, beginning with Critical Strike. Chance to hit attacks can exceed 100%, gain additional critical hit chance equal to 25% of excess chance to hit with attacks. Okay, so usually you don't care about accuracy above capping your hit chance unless you're playing an accuracy stacker to scale something else. Now this node will allow the chance to hit to actually exceed 100%, and you gain a quarter of any percentage above 100% as flat added critical strike chance with attacks, which can then be scaled by increases to critical strike chance, which is obviously very strong. Now, the chance to hit formula for accuracy has extreme diminishing returns, and chance to hit caps out at 150%, at which point you'd have 12.5% added base crit, which is ridiculously good, but you're not going to be reaching 150% chance to hit. To do that, you'd need infinite accuracy. However, there's something to note here which I expect to see on a lot of Amazon builds, and that's much less specifically accuracy stacking and more the case of just dexterity stacking. And that's because dexterity grants 5 accuracy rating per point, and there's 2 notables on the tree to benefit this kind of stacking. Falcon Technique for 1% increased attack speed per 15 dexterity, and Falcon Dive for 1% increased attack speed per 250 accuracy rating. Now, it's entirely possible that these nodes get changed in the patch notes, but if not, this is going to be really good. Something to mention here is Blind, a debuff which inflicts 20% less accuracy rating and 20% less evasion rating baseline, but can be massively improved with nodes like Pocket Sand on the passive tree. Inflicting Blind on monsters will lower their evasion, making your accuracy more effective, increasing your hit chance so you gain more base crit from this node. Now, the last notable on this ascendancy is branching off from Critical Strike, Penetrate. Attacks using your weapons have added physical damage equal to 25% of the accuracy rating on the weapon. This turns a somewhat unwanted accuracy roll on your weapon, which could have been a damage roll, into an added physical damage modifier. Note that this will be an external added damage modifier, it won't be scaled by any local weapon increases. So this is pretty good. Ideally, you want to replace a hybrid phys modifier on your weapon with a flat accuracy modifier. For example, on a bow, a single accuracy prefix can net you up to 650 accuracy, which would be around 160 flat added physical damage, which is a lot of added damage. That's about 5 times as much as a tier 1 flat added phys roll on a ring. The interesting thing about this branch is how it fits into your character's progression, where the first critical strike node is going to be useful the moment you pick it up and continue to scale as you invest more and more into accuracy and dexterity. While Penetrate is a lot more situational, as you gain nothing from this node until you actually have an accuracy roll on your weapon, much less a good accuracy roll. So Penetrate especially seems more endgame focused. Now, in terms of builds, I expect we'll see a lot of spears because that's new in this patch, but I also expect to see some Amazon bow builds. The infused weapon skill especially could be really nice on a fast bow character for mapping. I also absolutely expect this ascendancy to be the most popular one, at least early into Dawn of the Hunt. What are your thoughts on the Amazon? Let me know by commenting below. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.